Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today I'm going to be talking about the Tracey Wigginton case. It's also known as the Lesbian Vampire case. So I'm sure you guys could imagine how someone could get a title like that. Early in the morning of 22nd of October 1989, a man by the name of Stephen Kern was rowing the Brisbane water. It was a very peaceful morning. It was earlier than normal for him, and he was the only one in the water. And as he was rowing, he saw what appeared to be a body, and he got closer to it, and he saw that it was completely naked. The body's head was basically cut off from ear to ear, and the only thing holding the body together was the spine. That same morning, around the time the body was discovered, Elena Baldock woke up like any average morning, and she saw that her husband wasn't in bed. And it wasn't uncommon for him to go out drinking with his friends and staying out very late, but it was uncommon for him to stay out all night and into the morning. At the crime scene, the police found a pile of neatly folded clothes, a pair of trousers, and a shirt that belonged to the victim. At the crime scene, there was also a wallet that had some form of identification. I'm not sure what it was, but it showed that the victim was called Edward Baldock, and he was a 47-year-old husband and a father of 4. On the evening of the 21st of October 1989, so a day before the body was found, Edward said goodbye to his wife Elena like any normal day, and he went out drinking and playing darts with his friends at the club. The club was only 15 minutes away, so it wasn't that far of a drive. The last known sighting of Edward alive was when he stumbled out of the club at 11 p.m. and said goodbye to his friends. Edward was a well-known family man. He had no altercations with anyone to give a motive for such a brutal crime, so the police thought that it must have been a random killing. Of course, understandably, this was a very disturbing scene, so Stephen immediately called the police, and they ended up cornering the area where the body was found. At the crime scene, underneath his trousers and the shirt, there was a pair of shoes, and inside the shoes there was a bank card, and it didn't belong to Edward, but it had T.A. Wigginton on it. After a few hours of discovering the body, police knocked on 24-year-old Tracey Wigginton and took her into questioning. In Tracey's first interview, she said that she and a friend called Kim Jarvis were walking around the area and they noticed a suspicious looking couple. After this, police decided to get Kim Jarvis into questioning, and Kim gave a completely different story. And of course, because of this, police found this very suspicious and they decided to interview Tracey again. When she got re-interviewed, she said that she wasn't 100% honest with police and that she was going to be from now onwards. She said that her and Kim were walking out of the club, and she was in the same club as Edward Baldock, and she was walking out of the club when she stumbled over something. That something that she tripped over was a body, and they were both so disturbed that they just left in panic without calling police. Police again found this very suspicious, that the story was changing so much, but they didn't have enough evidence to link either of the women to the murder. While Tracey and Kim were being questioned, 2 more names came up: Lisa Patinsky and Tracey Wool. Tracey Wigginton wasn't known to police. There was nothing about her that stood out. She appeared to be calm and in control during all of her interviews. So let's talk about Tracey Wigginton for a little bit. Tracey was born in Northern Australia. Her mother was adopted. Her and her 2 adopted sisters were regularly abused by her adopted mother. She would whip them with electrical cord. Tracey's mother, Rhonda, was able to escape her abusive home when she married a man named Bill, and in 1965, they had a baby girl, Tracey. But Tracey's father didn't want the responsibility of a child, so he left. Now, Rhonda couldn't raise Tracey alone, so she moved back into her abusive parents' home. When Tracey was 4 years old, Rhonda's mother met a man out of town, and she wanted to be with him, so she left Tracey with her abusive parents, and she went to live with this man, leaving Tracey alone in her abusive parents' home. Tracey was then adopted and raised by her grandparents. Tracey's grandmother, even though she abused her daughter a lot, both physically and mentally, she never abused Tracey. It was quite the opposite. She loved her a lot. However, Tracey's adopted sister, Michelle, was not so lucky. She was mentally and physically abused a lot, and she would often be whipped, and she would sleep in the dog's cage. Tracey Wigginton had a very strict upbringing. She wasn't allowed to have any friends. The only people she really interacted with was either her grandparents or their friends. And because of this, she grew very close to her adopted sister, Michelle, and Michelle kind of became her only friend. Although Tracey was never abused by her grandmother, her witnessing this abuse on Michelle had a very long-lasting, damaging effect on Tracey. When Tracey was in high school, she got into a lot of trouble. She was accused of molesting a few girls, and because of this, she got expelled. Soon after Tracey got expelled, she got sent into a Catholic school, and there she didn't have many friends. People found her quite strange and odd, but Tracey didn't stay there for long. She actually dropped out at the age of 17. When Tracey was older, she said that her grandfather had sexually abused her when she was 8 years old. Tracey's grandmother spoke quite openly about her hatred towards men, and this, coupled with the fact that she was sexually abused by her grandfather, must have fueled her anger and hatred towards men. In her teens, Tracey loved playing with Ouija boards and tarot cards, and this stayed with her all the way through her teens into her adult life. In 1979, Tracey's grandfather died of cancer, and soon after Tracey's grandmother found another partner, Tracey was seen to be this kind of rebellious teenager, and he was given the task of disciplining her. One time when he was disciplining her, Tracey fought back, and he actually ended up in the hospital with really bad head injuries. And this was another incident that just kind of fueled her hatred towards men. After Tracey's grandfather's death, her grandmother also passed away, and Tracey at 18 was able to inherit $75,000. And with this money, she bought a motorcycle, and she spent the rest of the money on a very wild social life. And soon after, the inheritance money was all spent, and her life kind of just slipped into chaos. She worked briefly as a prostitute, and she was in a very, very dysfunctional relationship with a woman by the name of Sunshine. Sunshine was bisexual, and her and Tracey were married, but Sunshine would often cheat on Tracey with men, and because of this, their marriage fell apart. After her failed marriage, Tracey became friends with a woman called Lisa Pazinski, and the two soon became lovers. The two women became friends with another two women, Tracey Waugh and Kim Jarvis, and these four women were all in police custody. According to Lisa, Tracey Waugh, and Kim, Tracey Wigginton was the ringleader of the group. She would often do black magic, and they would meet up in graveyards for drinking sessions. Tracey Wigginton believed that she was a vampire, and because of this, she believed that she needed blood to survive, and she would often drink pig's blood. Lisa, Tracey's girlfriend, would also allow her to drink blood from her veins. 15 months had passed, and the four women stood in front of a judge to see if there was sufficient evidence to go into trial for the murder of Edward Bulldog. Tracey Wigginton was implicated by the three other women as the one who committed the murder, and when she was shown the bank card, she confessed the murder. But before she could get sentenced, Tracey Wigginton underwent 2 weeks of psychiatric examination just to determine whether or not she was mentally accountable for her actions. It was determined that Tracey Wigginton was legally insane at the time of the murder. Despite all of this, the mental health clinic that she was in made the ruling that she was in fact responsible for her actions, even though she was mentally insane at the time, and that she understood all of the consequences. So after pleading guilty, she was sentenced to life in prison. The three other women pleaded not guilty, and they said that they were with Tracey that night, but they were acting under her influence because they believed that she was a vampire. Based on the women's previous interviews and witness statements, a timeline of events was made. 2 nights before the murder, Tracey Wigginton was driving with the other 3 women, and she asked them if they were willing to find a victim so that she could feed, and they all agreed. On the night of the murder, the 4 women met at the club, and they were drinking champagne, and people said that they looked like they were celebrating. At 11:30 p.m., the 4 women got into Tracey's car and were driving around trying to find a victim. Around that same time, Edward Bulldog wrapped up his night playing cards and drinking with his friends. At around midnight, Edward was very, very drunk, and he left the club and went out into the street. Tracey and the other women saw Edward, and they got closer to him. The 4 women agreed that one of them would act as a prostitute, and they would try to bring Edward into the car. Kim was the most attractive of the 4, so she agreed to do it. Edward got into the car, and the women drove near the Brisbane River, where they parked there. The 3 women, Lisa, Kim, and Tracey, waited there while Tracey Wigginton took Edward behind the boat shield. She was able to convince him to take off his clothes, and she told him to stay there because she needed to get something out of the car. While Edward waited for Tracey, Tracey went back to the car, and she asked the 3 other women if they wanted to join her because she was going to kill him. Lisa followed Tracey while the 2 other women stayed in the car. Tracey and Lisa both agreed that they would attack Edward, but as Lisa got closer, she couldn't do it. So Tracey alone went behind Edward, took the knife out of her pocket and drove it deep into his back. Then she took the knife out and stabbed him on the side of the neck. She stabbed him a total of 27 times. When Tracey was finished, Edward Bulldog fell into the ground, almost decapitated. While she was alone, she began drinking from his blood, and after she was satisfied, she cleaned herself in the river and she got back into the car with the 3 other women. The women asked Tracey if she had fed, and she said yes, and they drove back to their homes like nothing ever happened. Kim took the murder weapon and she washed it with bleach. When questioned about the murder, Tracey said that she felt nothing. She sat there smoking a cigarette while Edward was dying. In 1991, a jury convicted Tracey Wigginton of murder and life imprisonment with a minimum of 13 years. Lacey Patinski was also convicted of murder, Kim of manslaughter, and Tracey Waugh was surprisingly cleared. And in her one and only interview, she expressed remorse, and she said that when she started stabbing, she couldn't stop. And she closed by saying that murder is a terrifying experience. It's playing God, and no one should have that type of power, but we all do. So yeah, this is it for this case. Quite an interesting and disturbing one. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please subscribe and like this video. It would help me a lot. And yeah, I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!